The UN chief says world leaders have finally recognized a fundamental and long-standing truth, that the global financial architecture is simply not working for everyone, further imperiling progress towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals.
No example of the international financial architecture's failure is more glaring than its handling of debt. The last 4 years have been nothing short of a debt disaster. Developing countries already face the bias of credit rating agencies while paying much higher interest rates compared to developed countries. In this post-pandemic period, interest rates have soared to perilous heights. Development plans are quickly swamped by a tsunami of debt servicing costs. And countries are faced with impossible and even heartbreaking decisions about how to allocate funding. In 25 developing countries, more than a fifth of tax revenue goes towards servicing external debt.
A view echoed by the administrator of the UN Development Fund, who told the Assembly that debt servicing was literally bleeding economies, to the extent that they were not able to invest in the development of their own countries.
This is the reality that we must confront when we talk about debt sustainability and socio-economic equality, because indeed debt and our financial system operates in a highly unequal world. And therefore we need to disaggregate these numbers. We need to also look at the implications for different economies. And sometimes it is not the GDP per capita indicator that should be the driving determinant. Take small island developing states, but also take low-income countries. But indeed, if you look at debt sustainability in some of the greatest countries at risk at the moment in terms of their national debt, they are in fact middle-income countries.
The Prime Minister of Barbados said there was no more pressing topic for the majority of the world's population than to settle the issue of debt, one giving certain countries the greatest stress.
Every dollar of debt is not the same, and that we need to have a different arrangement with respect to how we view debt. Short-term debt of 15 years cannot build hospitals, cannot build schools, but we perpetuate with the nonsense such that invariably countries and continents, as in the case of Africa, 751 million people live in countries that spend more on debt than spend on education and healthcare. If we do not educate these children, if we do not sustain their lives, how will they grow up to repay the debt which is being incurred in their name?
She labelled the common framework agreed by the G20 amid the COVID-19 pandemic in 2022 a failure, an initiative to allow countries to restructure their debt and deal with insolvency and protracted liquidity problems.
The common framework needs radical overhaul, and we have in our past the success of the HIPC moment that saw us put arrangements in place to be able to move countries out of poverty. If there is a need to be able to write off debt for those at the very bottom, let us do so. But there is also a need to recognize that middle-income countries are at risk of pauperization if we do not change how we relate to the issue of debt and the orthodoxy that we foist on them. The reality is there is no magic to a debt to GDP 60% ratio. But yet we foist it on countries in the context of an IMF program or in the context of credit rating agencies determining whether debt is sustainable for countries, irrespective of the fact that there may be no investment to be able to allow those countries to withstand the ravages of the climate crisis and to build resilience so that less people die and more livelihoods are saved when they are in fact hit by a climate crisis that they did not contribute to.
Further calling for decision makers to summon the world to change the fundamental orthodoxy of how debt is treated in the 21st century. Sherwin Bryce-Pease, SABC News, New York.